Hello and welcome to Nocab Game Design. Making a level is hard. According to flow theory, game designers need to strike the balance between presented challenge and player skill exactly to induce fun. And even if you don't subscribe to flow theory, deciding what parts of the game to make challenging, how challenging it should be, and exactly how to add that challenge is, well, challenging. In a previous episode, I defined the technical term challenge as difficulty plus complexity. But in this episode, I want to try a different approach. Instead of focusing on the game design theory, today I'll be discussing some practical examples of challenge. What specifically do the developers of the Valkyria Chronicles do to make Chapter 13 here challenging? And what general lessons can we learn for our games? In this episode, I'm going to identify some of the building blocks of challenge. Let's get right into it. This level is not easy. The player starts in the southern trenches, has to run across no man's land in the center, then into enemy trenches and fight close combat up to this base. That's part 1. Once the player captures this base, then the enemy Valkyrie arrives, Sylvaria. I talked about her in a previous episode titled Unkillable, Overpowered Boss Fight, which tells you everything you need to know about her. That's the mission overview, but what specifically in this level is challenging? Let's start with the most visually impactful, the no man's land. A large swath of this level is taken away from the player. The developers are saying the characters have to end their turns in a trench, or they will die. This is the first building block of challenge. Take things away from the player. Here, the developers are taking away tactical mobility, limiting the player to stay in these small trenches. But other things are missing from this level too. There's no tanks in part 1, which could double as mobile cover. There's no orders to be given, which can boost units' defenses, and to a certain extent, even visibility is taken away. The minimap is not helpful, and the architecture of the trenches only allows a player to see a few yards in front of them. So that's building block 1. Take things away from the player. But as a personal aside, I have to say this. Taking toys from the player is dangerous. Be very careful with what and how you take things away, and always make sure you give it back. But taking is only one building block. Giving things to the enemy is another technique. Here, the enemy has defensible positions. Consider watching my previous video about encounters. The enemy also has powerful units. Sylvaria is the most powerful in the game, but she only appears for a turn or two at the end. The enemy also has cannons, machine gun nests, heavy tanks, elite units, named elite units. The enemy is positively overcharged with firepower. The second building block of challenge is to give the enemy more resources to work with, more health, more units, more action points, more space to move. Another building block is traps, but again, game designers should be reluctant to use real traps in dead ends because they are inherently unfair. Unless you're the game company From Software and making another Dark Souls, don't use real traps. Or if you use traps, give the player some kind of warning or don't make them deadly. For example, the dead ends in this level are small and don't waste a lot of time. The traps are basically a single machine gun unit hiding around a corner, which is dangerous, but not deadly. The most deadly trap here is if the player decides to run out of cover here, straight towards the machine gun nest. But the bunker is not hidden, so the player should have ample warning. Good design. Everything I've talked about so far are examples of how to scale the difficulty of a level. Remember, difficulty plus complexity equals challenge. The next building blocks will all be examples of complexity scaling. The first technique here is that the player does not have perfect information. I touched on this earlier, saying visibility was something that was taken away. But hiding the enemies and a downright useless minimap turns this level into a memory game. Should I turn left or right to get to my objective? Was it a scout or a machine gun around this corner? The level architecture and lack of information forces a player to rely on their memory a little more, which is not a major challenge spike, but it's not trivial either. This level also features multiple simultaneous battles. The left and right side of the map are more or less isolated. This is a level design technique that was used previously, and in that episode I pointed out how it forced the player to manage 2 battlefields at the same time, which increased the cognitive complexity and therefore the challenge. But this level takes it a step further. After the first base is captured, then the tanks spawn back in. It's made clear in the cutscenes and dialogue that they are for dealing with Silvaria. This is effectively a third parallel battlefield the player needs to manage. One on the left, one on the right, and one with the tanks. So if you want to increase the cognitive complexity of a level, consider making the player do multiple things at the same time. All these techniques for building challenges have been seen before. This level isn't really introducing anything new, but it does feature the most challenge blocks so far. The last point I want to make is pointing out how these blocks are used together. Some of the challenges are stacked on top of each other at the same time. For example, in part 1, resources are taken away from the player, and at the same time, the enemy is given the advantage. Dealing with multiple challenges at the same time is a multiplier effect that can produce wicked hard levels. But also, this level features challenges laid next to each other in series. The very fact that I described this level as part 1 and part 2 shows this. Forcing the player to slog through more challenges one after the other is also hard, but it's additive. This level does both, as all good games should. There's not one technique or tool that will always make a good game, so masterpiece games tend to use a combination. They use multiple building blocks and organize them in a variety of ways. Exactly what blocks to use and how to lay them is up to you as a designer. Thanks for watching. By the way, this video is not an exhaustive list of challenge building blocks, just the ones that I noticed when studying this level. Let me know in the comments if you can think of any other techniques. And if you enjoy what I do, please consider subscribing. If you press the like button, then you'll be telling the algorithm to show you more game design content, both my videos and other related channels. In the next episode, the battle continues, but this time, Squad 7 has a Valkyrie of their own. I'll see you there.